Live. Hi everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion today on the role of the dive industry in marine conservation. My name is David McCann. I am a marine biologist and I run a small marine conservation organization on the east coast of Sabah, Malaysia, called Scuba Junkie Seas. And today I have the pleasure of being your host. And I'd like to start the session today by wishing everyone a happy World Oceans Day. Now, anybody who knows me knows that I'm very passionate about this topic and encouraging the dive industry to fulfill this requirement. I personally believe that the industry has a moral and ethical obligation towards protecting our oceans. I mean, regardless of our role in the industry, whether it be as the operator, the manufacturer, the dive professional, or simply a diver, we are lucky to experience the joy and beauty of the underwater world. And with this joy, I believe, comes a responsibility to protect and conserve. And luckily, actually, it also makes it sensible business choice as well, because ultimately the health of the industry is inextricably linked with the health of the ocean. So I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by a diverse array of panelists representing different stakeholders in the industry. And I would now like to invite each of them in turn just to introduce yourself briefly, your role in the organization you represent and what your organization's contribution to marine conservation is. So I guess we'll start with Chloe, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, my name's Chloe Harvey. I'm the director of a UK charity called the Reef Foundation, and we, alongside the UN Environment Programme, we run the Greenfins Initiative, which is has the aim to make sustainable diving the social norm. So we work with over 600 dive centres around the world to try and encourage them to improve their environmental practices in line with the Greenfins Code of Conduct, which is the only internationally recognised industry environmental standard for scuba diving. We also work with governments around the world, so wherever Greenfins is, the government there has adopted Greenfins as their national approach for sustainable scuba diving. And we're also now working more closely with the consumer, especially during this lockdown time, reaching out to the consumers and trying to inspire and empower them to make sensible choices when they're planning their next big adventure, because all of us are desperate for it. And there's lots that we can do in the meanwhile, as well as working closely with the dive centres around the world, because there's also lots that they can do, which I'm sure I'll have an opportunity to talk a bit more about later on. So that's me.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Chloe. It'll be very interesting actually to hear your opinion later about how you think the industry has progressed over the past couple of years. So we'll move on to our next panelist. So JC, if you would like to take the mic and introduce yourself.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Jean-Claude Monachon. JC is a bit easier as a Swiss and French, having a French name. So I'm the SSI Vice President for international business development, but I'm also very involved in our, let's say, movement, which is called the SSI Blue Ocean. We created that to really make sure that we could involve every diver, no matter from where they are coming, and also every center, every mermaid, everyone in this industry that would be helping us forwarding the message to protect our oceans. And today is a World Ocean Day, so we have also during this weekend, actually, we had a big initiative in China, and we had about 200, I would say, divers, mermaid, free divers involved in that, and we want to convey this message all over the world, and we try our best to be very open to that. It's not a money-making thing, it's really to bring everyone into this, let's say, to this vision that we have.
Fantastic. Thank you, JC. Again, it's going to be very interesting to hear how SSI has developed over the past couple of years. Moving on to our next panelist, Heidi, if you would like to take the mic and introduce yourself.
Thanks, David. So I'm Heidi Tait. I'm from the Tangaroa Blue Foundation. We're based in Australia and we coordinate the Australian Marine Debris Initiative. It's a national network of volunteers and partner organisations government agencies and industry bodies, all focused on the removal of marine debris. We collect data on everything that is removed, and we use that data to try and track the debris back to the source, and then work with the correct stakeholders to find source reduction plans that would prevent those items from being released into the environment in the first place. And then by ongoing cleanups and data collection, we also have a really good way to monitor the impact of those source reduction plans and intervention strategies to make sure they are actually working. I guess my passion from the ocean came from being a diving instructor for 20 years. I had the pleasure of working all over the world as well. And that's actually what was the inspiration to creating Tangaroa Blue 16 years ago. So looking at it from both sides.
Wonderful. Thanks, Heidi. As we all know, marine debris is a massive issue. And I think the industry does have a big role in helping to try and tackle that. So again, that's something we'll explore further later on. Now I'd like to hand over to Jamie. Jamie, if you'd like to introduce yourself and the organization, that would be fantastic.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jamie Piyada. I'm the project leader of Thailand Manta project. We are affiliated with the Manta Trust, and our work basically focus on the conservation and research of mobile debris worldwide. As an organization, Manta Trust has over 20 projects around the world, and we each study different aspects of the mantas and mobile arrays. Our work really rely on the diving industry, the operator and the diver as individuals, since we're dealing with migratory species. So it's very important to have a collaboration, a good collaboration, and we do with the diving industry. So I'm very excited to be joining this panel and discuss more about this.
Lovely, thank you, Jamie. We will definitely, or we hope to explore anyway, later on the power of sort of collaborations and how the industry can work better together to achieve our goals. And now moving on, we'll like to invite Jim and Paul. I'll let you guys figure out how you want to do this together to introduce yourselves and Fourth Element and Mission.
Thanks, David. Good morning or afternoon or evening, everybody, wherever you are. I'm Jim Standing, one of the co-founders of Fourth Element, along with Paul, and we specialize in making gear that you wear to dive. And about 5 years ago, we started to create our Ocean Positive product lines, starting out with swimwear made from recycled nylon, including ghost fishing net as part of the constituent of that, and have really grown to develop our product line as a responsible business within the dive industry, rather echoing David, your comments earlier about saying that, as divers, we have a responsibility to do this. Well, certainly as dive manufacturers, we also share that responsibility to act to do what we can to protect the oceans. And we founded something called Mission 2020 just over 2 years ago, where we decided that we would make it our mission to reduce our plastic impact. And not only that, but to encourage other organizations in the dive industry to join us in this mission, in this project. And I'm happy to say that we were met with great response from other people within the industry, other organizations, and there are many now who have made changes in the way they package their products, the way they make their products, and also in the way they share the information about how they're doing this.
Lovely, thank you, Jim. Paul, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, thank you very much, David. Just like to say hello, everyone. And just my role at Fourth Element, as Jim mentioned, we're co-founders. My role is managing director, and just building on what Jim has said already, we made a decision about 5 or 6 years ago to adopt more sustainable practices and to look for more sustainable options with regards to our material choice and the way in which we were actually creating product. But it basically goes further than that in terms of attempting to go forward as a functioning, successful business with sustainability at the heart. So we've actually invested in solar panels for our energy. We've obviously invested a lot in packaging materials to avoid single-use plastic and so on. So yeah, absolutely critical that we encourage as many companies to do so, to follow suit, to join Mission 2020, because as we all agree, as people involved and as companies involved in the diving industry, we have a vested interest and an absolute responsibility to do what we can to protect the environment.
Yeah, Paul, I couldn't agree with you more. I absolutely, the stuff that you're talking about, I think, you know, when we're looking at the role of the dive industry and marine conservation, first and foremost, I guess all of us need to look at our environmental footprints and try to minimize those, whether we're talking as an individual, as an organization, as a business. And I really do applaud Fourth Element for really trailblazing and leading the way with that regard. I guess just to continue on that vein of discussion, Fourth Element, to my knowledge, basically set a target that by today, World Oceans Day 2020, that you would have eliminated single-use plastics or single-use plastic packaging, sorry, from your products. And I'm just intrigued to find out a bit more about how, whether or not you've achieved that target, how the journey has been, and maybe if you can just provide some advice, some of the things you've had to overcome for others then that are wanting to follow you down on that journey.
Well, sure. I mean, it has been an amazing, amazing kind of journey of discovery for us. And yeah, we set a target to eliminate single-use plastic packaging. And being totally honest, until the coronavirus crisis hit, we were on target, so we would be there. We're a little bit behind schedule. A couple of the packaging innovations that we wanted to bring weren't quite ready, were delayed by the events that have been happening over the last few months. But we've been adopting some other new ideas. Shipping suits without any packaging at all will be something that we're doing now, rather than putting them in plastic. But the objective from now on is to continue to innovate with that. And we started this a few years ago with moving to packaging in cardboard, and then also looking at the cassava starch-based products that emulated plastic but had a much lower environmental impact and could be disposed of by in domestic composting facilities, or in fact just putting on your compost heap. And those things have proven to be hugely successful, and we've shared that information with other manufacturers. We've had meetings where we've sat down with some of the bigger companies in our industry and said, look, this is where we're getting it from. This is the source. This is how much it's costing us. If you want it, we'll point you in the right direction and go for it. You don't need to spend your time reinventing the wheel. And this is part of the bigger picture, actually, is that many of us in the industry have been able to share these ideas and been inspired to share these ideas with each other, so that we are all working towards the goal. It is a tough goal. And when I talk to some of our colleagues in the industry, their comments to me now about what, when I've been asking them how they're getting on, what they've been doing, that it's harder than it looks. But it is something that everybody that I speak to is committed to achieving. It's just taking everyone some time. I think our Mission 2020 will probably only actually be fully realized in terms of the packaging in about 3 months' time. So sad to say we missed the target, but we do see the end for us. We do see the end point where we hit that target, and we do see the point where single-use plastic packaging is a thing of the past for us. And in the meantime, some of our consumers will be getting deliveries with no plastic on it at all, or no packaging rather on it at all, rather than continuing to send stuff out. There is going to be a transition period, but we do have a tactic for that transition going forward.
It's amazing.
Yeah, that's absolutely wonderful to hear. I mean, it's an extremely ambitious target. I think, missing it by 3 months is nothing to worry about in the slightest. And I really do hope that others follow down that line as well. Speaking to colleagues in the industry, one of the things we regularly hear is that the certifying agencies, when it comes to teaching courses and so on, all of the materials are provided with single-use plastic wrapping the books and so on that are distributed. So perhaps, JC, I know you're not representing SSI, I know it's SSI Blue Ocean, but perhaps you could share a little bit about how SSI approached that, and are there any movements to remove those single-use packagings from the course materials?
Yes, certainly. I think when SSI decided 5 years ago, more or less, to go on a digital journey, then this really started. So we do deliver all our courses basically on a digital platform. So there is everything linked to that. So even the plastic certification cards are not, let's say, a must anymore, because everyone gets his certification card directly on his mobile phone or on a digital platform. And we have seen a substantial decrease of the usage of the, let's say, the certification cards in a plastic form. So that was really the first step. It took a while, but I would say on a yearly basis now we see really this big decrease. And I think the situation right now will continue to improve in that direction. Plus, all our materials are definitely, as much as possible, not packaged with any plastic anymore. We really started to remove everything, and even the books are not wrapped into plastic. But I have to say, we hardly sell or provide any books anymore. Everything is really digital, and we have really enforced that. Plus, we influence also our partners in our group. You know, we belong to the head group. So Mares, for example, as a manufacturer, also had to let's say, go in this direction. So they also started to really remove plastic as much as possible, and they are also in this same journey.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. I hope if any of the other certifying agencies are listening into our conversations, hopefully they're thinking down this route as well. Jim, you mentioned actually the impact that COVID had, and I kind of want to bring that up. I'm sorry to allow COVID to come into our conversation, but I think it's almost impossible to avoid. And the reason I want to bring it up actually is because obviously post-COVID, the dive industry is going to have to adapt. And there's going to have to be a lot of measures introduced to help minimize transmission risks and ensure sort of safety within the industry. Now, one of the things that I have seen promoted by operators and certifying agencies is actually using single-use plastics you disinfect your equipment, you wrap that equipment in single-use plastics to showcase to your new guests that it has been cleaned. And I'm actually very, very concerned about this, about the impact that it could have on the environment, and the fact that I don't actually believe that it provides any protection to people in the slightest. And Chloe, I know you do a lot of work with the industry and promoting environmental standards. Another one of the things that's being brought in is with disinfecting equipment. So based on CDC recommendations, you need to use 1/3 of a cup of bleach for every gallon of water that you are using to disinfect the equipment. Now, if I think of an average dunk tank that is used for cleaning equipment, you're probably looking at about 10 liters of bleach per dunk tank, and it has to be replaced daily. And so just with regards to all of this, Chloe, I was just wondering what your thoughts are on how people can adapt to the new normal while also maintaining their high environmental standards.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. It's certainly throwing up some new challenges for us, that's for sure, as well as some opportunities along the way. But in terms of the disinfecting, the cleaning regime, it's gonna change, and it already has in some places where I can see that diving is already starting to pick up. And there are some great guidance being put out specifically through Dan, which we have recently given them some input from an environmental point of view to start trying to put those environmental messages that are in line with the Greenfin's disinfecting guidelines. But there is going to be a new norm, and also everywhere is going to be different. So we're working with the governments that have adopted green fins. A lot of governments are putting out their recommendations and standards. We're seeing in some places that there's some knee-jerk reactions. So people are perhaps trying to do more than they need to in terms of, looking at, I know that the bleach concentration that you just mentioned, Dave, is the lower end. I'm hearing much higher concentrations being recommended as well. So I think that the first thing that we can do is follow the guidelines that are on, from the producers of these chemicals, and not be tempted to make it more concentrated. And then also try and use common sense as well. We've outlined some very clear steps in the green fins disinfecting guidelines on how you can make bleach safe before disposing it into the marine environment, if you have to dispose it to the marine environment. And the best case scenario is to actually put that into sewage treatment if that's available to you. So I think that also as consumers as well, we need to be careful about what we're demanding and what we're pushing for as well. And, things like wrapping disinfected kit in plastic isn't going to make it any safer for our use in the long run. So moves like that, I think we can have quite clear voices over trying to guide the industry as well as a big voice to play in that.
Dave, if I may just jump in on that a little bit. It's something that Paul and I, along with Chantal Taylor-Newman from the Diver Medic and Dan, were discussing actually before the COVID crisis hit, looking at how do you show that something is clean and good to use. And we've actually been working on something, having discovered that the vast majority of disinfectants have a little warning sign on the side saying, toxic to aquatic life, and should be disposed of in a recognized waste facility. And I know this isn't the place for pushing products too much, but we have actually developed a disinfectant which is safer for the environment and safer to dispose of, and along with a system that doesn't involve wrapping it in single-use plastic, but rather using paper-based tape to cover the mouthpiece of the regulator or the box of the mask, or whatever, however you're presenting the product to a customer, that has much less environmental impact. And that's something that we've been developing for a while. Entirely coincidentally, that there's been this awful pandemic, but hopefully enabling dive centres to be able to take a more responsible route to disposing of it afterwards.
Is that products? Sorry, Jim, just give us a bit more information about when, how, and where.
Well, we're actually going to launch it tomorrow. It's called Good to Dive, and it's a powder that you dissolve in water, and after a short period of time, the waste material is benign for disposal into the environment. And I'll send you a tub tomorrow, Chloe.
That would be amazing. What's the sorry to get technical? What's the disinfecting chemical agent?
It's basically an oxygenation process. So it's an oxidizing bleach, but it's not bleach as in sodium hydroxide.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to hear about the tape, because I have we were trying to do something ourselves with that, but we weren't very successful. So that would be really helpful to know about as well.
I'll send you some tomorrow.
Thanks.
Yeah, the first.
Sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, yeah, it is literally just about to be sent out to the initial users. Did you mention Good to Dive is the product name, basically.
Fantastic. As always, Fourth Element leading the way. That's brilliant. Well done.
Thank you.
Can I ask, actually, I know this was being developed before the COVID outbreak. Do we know, does this new Good to Dive powder work for disinfecting from potential COVID residue?
It's a good question. Basically, the technology has been tested on viruses for over many, many years. We've just adapted an existing technology for this process.
This is all absolutely fantastic to hear. I know from within diving circles that everyone is obviously concerned about maintaining diver safety, but also wanting to maintain the health of the environment as well. And so hearing about these new products is absolutely great. I guess what I'd like to do now, before we leave COVID behind, you know, Jamie and Heidi, your two organizations rely heavily on volunteers to contribute towards citizen science and cleaning up the ocean, collecting ID shots of mantas and so on. I guess these are discussions that you guys have been having as well. And I was just wondering, what sort of things are you thinking to implement while also maintaining environmental standards to ensure that you still have your volunteer base coming in?
We absolutely have been affected by COVID, and but we have adapted really well, and I'm really proud of our team. We're not doing any massive big cleanup events with multiple, 50 people like we normally would. We've put those on hold. But we also have a lot of scientific monitoring sites that can be done with 1 or 2 people. And so we've expanded on that data set and been able to continue that throughout the whole process by using local communities, local partners, and our Tangaroa Blue crew that are based regionally to continue those monitoring data sets. So I guess we really focus on being not a cleanup organisation. The removal of debris is about collecting data to help us track to the source. So we can still do that. We just, instead of having 30 people go and do a beach in one morning, we've had 3 or 4 of our staff do it over 3 days. That's kept them working. It's kept our long-term data sets going, and it's enabled everybody to stay safe. And we also have a data collection app, the AMD data collection app, and we've had individual people going out and doing their own beach. We've been allowed to get outside in Australia to go and do exercise the whole time that COVID's been around. And so we've had a lot more individual data sets being submitted in. So it's been an adaptation, but we are very much looking forward to getting out into those areas where we do need lots of people to remove, tons of debris. And we're hoping that's not too far in the distance.
Yeah, for the Thailand Manta project, I guess luckily for us, the Manta season has just come to an end in Thailand as well a month ago. So it's going to start again towards the end of the year. So hopefully everything will find some solution and a better solution in terms of social interacting and how we can accepting more volunteer and people coming in. But during this time, because our work based a lot on citizen science as well, where people can submit their data, the Manta ID shots via email or website. So in this case, I guess it doesn't really affect us at all with COVID. We really encourage people actually to use this time that they have sitting at home. If you're bored, go through your picture archive, which I'm sure if you're a diver like me, I have too many. I would say it's too many pictures to go through. It's a good time that you can still save the ocean, even though many of us are stuck at home and cannot really go into the ocean. Use this time to contribute to the science, and because at the end of the day, it's to the protection of these animals and the ocean itself.
Yeah, I mean, obviously all of us have to adapt to the new normal. I heard in the previous conversation preceding our panel discussion, Dr. Sylvia Earle mentioned that one of the biggest issues is the fact that a lot of people don't know about the issues. And I guess that's what I feel is a big role of the dive industry, is actually making more people aware and engaging different stakeholders in these conversations and bringing these incredible photos and videos to people's screens. And I'm just wondering what people have been doing during the sort of lockdown to kind of continue that engagement and get the message out there with others. Do I have any volunteers who would like to comment first on that?
Yeah, maybe I can start.
Or has nobody been? Yeah.
I think maybe the good side in this whole lockdown situation is that we really could use the virtual world in pushing different initiatives, and to keep our training centers and pros active. we managed to have all our marine ecology programs fully digitalized in many languages. So we really gave them the tools on how they could remain active with their divers, with their students all over the world, and giving them the possibility to really use all these programs to be taught to families, to people that were sitting at home, not knowing what to do, actually. And we have seen really a massive uptake on the registration or certification sides of these courses, because we gave really the possibility to all of them to engage with divers they may not have been engaging for a long time. You know, if you are in a resort, you can still communicate with all the divers that you have in your database. So we explained that very thoroughly, and I think this has been, for the first time, a big increase in, I would say, certifications in marine ecology programs, which were not the case before. Everyone is always screaming to have certification programs, etc., but they never teach it. Now they were basically not having any other solution than teach a program or various programs that would really go in the direction of the interest of the divers and also non-divers. So I think this has been the good side, I would say, of all this situation.
Thank you, JC. Perhaps, Jim, I'd like to come back to you or Paul. And I'm just wondering, through Mission 2020, if there has been any outreach or engagement, particularly to the next generation, you know, as we're supposedly handing on the baton. And I guess we're supposed to be in that generation, but the next generation after us.
I think we start to qualify as being a bit too long in the tooth these days, David, or something like that. Yeah, I mean, Mission 2020 was primarily intended to be this kind of dive community project, but one of the interesting things that's come from it has been the engagement, especially at the level of dive centers and individual dive instructors who made a pledge to change the way they ran their business. And not only did they say, we're going to abandon single-use plastic, for example, providing water in single-use plastic bottles on a liveaboard or on a charter boat, but also in pledging to educate their students, in particular open water students, as part of this process of them becoming divers, is educating them to become custodians of the ocean as well, and really making that a bit more of a fundamental part of their presentation to their students. And that was an unintended consequence, shall we say, that you know, when Paul and I were talking about it at first, it was about how do we change our company, how do we change the way that we operate, because we felt it was important for Fourth Element to be responsible, and then that expanded to how, you know, how can we encourage other people to get involved. And we realized that just us doing it was a drop in the ocean. Getting all the other businesses and the other companies and organizations within the industry to make their commitments as well, that enabled it to get inside people's heads, and definitely to see the educational aspects of it come in that we hadn't anticipated at all.
It's great to hear that there's a lot of sort of leadership and guidance coming out of our panelists to the dive industry. And I think that's really, really important. I think you can also clearly see that within this group, everybody is very passionate about marine conservation, is obviously contributing to it as well. But perhaps we have people watching and listening who haven't actually made that step yet. And I guess what I'd like to do at this point is just, I guess, to look into the various roles and responsibilities of the different stakeholders within the industry. I guess when people think of the dive industry, they immediately think of the dive operators. But there's obviously a lot more people involved in that. For example, we have governments, we have the certifying agencies, the dive operators, the manufacturers, the NGOs, and divers. So I guess what I'd like to do at this point would be come to each of you in turn and give you one of those stakeholders, and ask you to sort of share with us what you think the role of that, or the key role of that stakeholder is, and also to share with us sort of how you think they're doing. Are they doing enough? Could they be doing more? What would they need to strengthen the work that they're doing? So sorry to kind of put people on the spot like this, but feel free to jump in if anybody has any points they'd like to make. So I'd like to start with government first, and I'll come to you, Jim. You can have government. So how do you think the governments around the world, just in general, are doing with regards to contributing to the dive industry in marine conservation?
Well, I think that clearly there's a huge role for governments in legislating. I mean, I don't want to get too political at this point, so I'll be a little bit careful, but just yesterday or over the weekend, reading that environmental protection has been rolled back in sanctuaries around on the coast of the USA. That kind of behavior is the point where governments need actually to recognize that they are as responsible. And in fact, whatever the rest of us do, if it's basically, you know, sunk below the waterline by moves like that, we'll never make any progress. And I think that really and truly, though, the government is there to represent the people. And I think it's also down to us as people, as voters, as people who actually have beliefs about how our world should look, that we should actually compel the government to do it. So we can't just sit here and expect the government to make all these decisions for us. We have to ask them to do it. We have to ask them to make more marine protected areas. We have to ask them to establish more no fishing zones, no take zones around the world. And, you know, I think I read somewhere, I think it may have been Dr. Sylvia Earle's quote, where she said that, you know, if you could protect your heart, if you could protect 10% of your heart, would that be enough? And of course it wouldn't. You'd want to protect 100% of your heart. So how can you only protect a small amount of the ocean and expect the rest of it to be okay? So when it comes down to it, governments have huge roles protecting, legislating, and to a certain extent making and keeping businesses, holding them to account. But certainly policy making and not reversing policies which have been intended to preserve our oceans. That would be a pretty good start. Sorry to get a bit political there.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. It's great to see your passion coming through, and I think that's a great message for anyone out there watching. You know, the government does have a major role to play, but we can't just expect things to happen. And you know, that's our power as an individual, is that if we all sort of stand up and shout about what we care about, then hopefully we can encourage the changes that are necessary or prevent those bad changes from taking place. So moving on then, I'd like to give the certifying agencies to Chloe, because Chloe, I know you do a lot of work with the various certifying agencies within the dive industry. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts on what you perceive their role to be and how you think they're getting on.
The role, well, the lead educators, you know, creating the gospel for the industry in some ways. So I think that the training agencies have an enormous responsibility for setting standards when it comes to what new divers and also what experienced divers who might be taking the next level of training feel is acceptable, specifically, you know, that social norm that I talked about, that we're trying to drive with Greenfins, trying to make sustainable diving the social norm. If it's taught to you when you very first start diving, then you are very unlikely to move from that. So I think all of us remember our first diving instructor. And I think that all of us are very much shaped by the information that's given to us by our first diving instructor. And in some ways, every dive guide, every dive leader, and every instructor that you come across after that as well, you know, they're the gods of your world when you're learning to dive and on your diving adventures. So I think the training agencies have a huge responsibility, and I think that there's a lot already been done in improving the language and the messages that are being pushed through training material and through communications from the training agencies. And it's great to see SSI taking moves as well to try and beef up the environmental programs that you're getting involved in there as well. But I think there's so much more that we can do. My dream with the training agencies is to make, obviously safety will always be first, and safety should always be first when it comes to scuba diving. But I think that some of those clear messages that are ingrained into us as divers from the beginning, safety messages, if we could find some other very clear messaging when it comes to the environment that we ingrain into students from the very beginning, so it just becomes normal to not touch the reef, to not interact with marine life in a way that might stress them out, to not take photographs in a way that might stress them out, to use advanced finning techniques to ensure that we don't stir the sediment. So I think that there's more that we can do to really make those environmental messages mainstreamed throughout the training courses. And that's something that we at the Reef World Foundation are working hard. We have a formal partnership with Paddy, and we're also working with RAID and on and off with SSI as well. And we welcome collaboration with all of the PSS as well. With all the training agencies. And I think there's a lot more that we can do to try and find some key messaging that we can mainstream throughout training courses from the beginning all the way through, because our data actually shows that some of the worst offenders are the most experienced divers, and specifically the most experienced divers with cameras in their hands. So I think that we need to also recognize that we need to mainstream it throughout all levels of training, not just entry level courses. But a lot has already been done. We're seeing so many more environmental messages being pushed out. When I went to DEMA last year, I was absolutely thrilled to see the number of people that were talking about sustainability, whereas the year before when I went to DEMA and ran the sustainable diving events there, I was recommended not to use the word sustainability because it's just not something that the industry was ready for. And then last year at DEMA, hearing so many people talking about the environment, it was, you know, I know that the US is a different kettle of fish. And if you come to ADEX, especially ADEX in Singapore, we've been talking about the environment for a very long time. But you can see that there's a change in the way that the industry is talking about it, and the training agencies are definitely catching up, that's for sure. So it's something that we want to keep on pushing though, for sure.
That's great to hear, Chloe. Thank you. It's great to hear that the certifying or training agencies are open to collaboration with organisations like Greenfins to review training materials and so on. And it's also, I think, a great message that came out of what you said, is that just to remind all dive instructors and dive leaders, you know, the impact that they have on the people who are in the water with them is unquestionable. And just to remember that, and that if you engage with divers, you can actually change the way they dive. Sometimes even those old school divers. So moving on to the next stakeholder then, I'd like to give dive operators to JC. I'm sure you've done a lot of work with various dive operators, so I would like to know what you think the dive operator role is, and how you think the dive operators are faring with regard to marine conservation.
Well, I think the dive operators are critical, or as critical participant in that, and having the role like a diving instructor when he starts to teach people to go in the water. At any stage or any level in the chain of the diving industry, everyone has a big role to play. And I think all the organizations, environmental organization, everyone has actually to join force and give the same message or give similar message. There is not let's say, because we are Blue Ocean, because it is Greenfins, whoever it is, at the end, we all want to achieve the same thing. And the more we can talk to the dive operators, the better it is. So, for example, with Blue Oceans, that's what we do. But we restarted, let's say, this whole part, and it took in a few months, we had 400 dive operators joining this movement. That's just a movement that conveys the same message, that works towards exactly the same goal. And if you think that there are, I don't know, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 diving operations in the world, there is still a long way to go, because some do still not have, let's say, the understanding of where it should go. So we always constantly have to hammer everyone on this direction. And I think we all do that ultimately. But the dive operators, we are showing their commitment to the environment and making changes, substantial changes in their operation are also, in my point of view, having more success because they attract a different type of customers. And these customers now are really looking into these, let's say, these methods that they are using. They look at how a dive operator is showing the protection of the environment. What do they do for that? What do they, which kind of message they do? And these dive operators have more success, definitely.
Okay, thanks for that, JC. I'm a bit mindful of the time, so I'm just going to pick one more stakeholder, and I'm going to give this one to Paul. Jamie and Heidi, I'm going to come to you in the final section. So Paul, I'm mindful that the majority of the people in the panel are actually from NGOs. So what I'd like you to do is be critical of the NGO sector and let us know how we're doing. What's our role and what could we be doing better to help the dive industry?
Oh, wow. Thanks for that. I guess, I mean, obviously, all the NGOs here and not being represented today fundamentally are, I suppose, saying the same thing, which is obviously to take care, to look after our environment, to adopt better practices and so on. So there's no questioning that the message and the intention is fantastic. I guess, I mean, obviously some probably do it more successfully than others. I wouldn't like to start rating success in that respect, but I guess there's a lot of value in working together. And I think the biggest challenge, or probably the dare I say fault, would be to be working alone and not necessarily work with other NGOs and start kind of protecting your particular focus or your area of expertise, shall we say, and preventing other people or in any way inhibiting others to help and get involved. So I think it's competition, you might say, for participation and involvement, I think is a potential challenge to overcome, so that you're seen more as working together and less kind of concerned about your own number of members or participants or whatever. And I guess having the common message, keeping things really clear for those people who are environmentally aware. And obviously what you're trying to do is to influence as many people as possible to all sort of share the same kind of goals to look after our oceans, but trying to make sort of messaging clear and understandable for the masses so that they can actually get on board and understand what they are supporting. And so there's no conflict, because I think there's a lot, even when, just to putting it back onto us as manufacturers, when we started to go down the route of single-use plastic or eliminating single-use plastic and changing our packaging, there was then other kind of criticism about, creating packaging that took more space when shipping. So that then sort of influenced our decision-making about, is that the best thing? And then you start questioning stuff. So that can be quite distracting, you might say. So it's having clarity about what the goal messages are, even if people get there in different ways. And I say I can't stress the importance of working together in a unified way so that everybody is clear about what we're trying to achieve. I guess that's it. That was
That was beautifully said, Paul. I couldn't agree with you more. I really do believe that together we are stronger. And unfortunately, I think there are many, many examples of people working in isolation rather than taking that joined up approach. One of the stakeholders, for example, that we haven't mentioned yet are the coastal communities. And I do often feel that they're left out of the equation. And, they do have a lot of knowledge and expertise. And, we think of the fishing community, for example, in the Coral Triangle alone. I mean, the knowledge they have about nursery areas and fishing grounds and so on. I mean, if we could all work together, it would really help to amplify the output of our efforts. I guess one example, I could come on to Jamie now, actually. A great example of organizations working together would be mantamatcher.org. I mean, within the NGO sector, I would agree that a lot of NGOs don't work together. And to take Mantas as an example, I guess there was all of the different Manta organizations working in isolation, and the Manta Matcher was the way that they all came together and learned a lot more actually about Mantas. So do you have any messages for us, Jamie, on that?
So basically at the moment, to my knowledge, is we are trying to develop a program that can recognize the Manta and that we can rely on it more than the usual one that we are using now, so that the result is accurate. But yeah, at the end of the day, I completely agree that, you know, we have to remember as a people working as an NGO or doing a project in conservation, that what are you doing? What is the main thing that you're working for is to protect the ocean, is to protect the species that you love, and is not about yourself. So yeah, we should be working together a lot more, and it will become a lot more effective when we do that. And it shows in many cases already. And you know, we love the collaboration when it comes to the Manta Matcher. I know it's still developing as well, but we can't do it alone because the ocean is a big place, and you know, we are everywhere. So we have to work together in order for the protection to work, especially when it comes to conservation. The more information we have, the better proof we have to approach the government to start effectively protecting it locally and internationally as a whole as well. So yeah, collaboration is a very, very big thing, and it's not just for an NGO themselves, but it's also you guys as a diver, as an individual. Even though you're not a diver, there's many ways that you can help as well, just by educating yourself, spreading awareness. Yeah, we all have a role to play on this one.
Lovely, thank you, Jamie. We also find the same thing happening, particularly with operators. Dive operators often see each other as competition. And rather than operators in an area working together to protect the reef that they all rely upon, they perhaps go off and do their own things. And so I'd like to hand over to you, Heidi, and you can kind of introduce us to the situation in Australia. How do you feel that the dive industry play together in terms of operators, and how have you overcome any stumbling blocks to try and make people work better together?
Yeah, it's a challenge because each of the dive operators is obviously trying to run their business and get more market share. And so there is that competition there. But I think that like any stakeholder group, that if they can decide on several things that they all agree on that they can work towards, then it will benefit the whole group as a whole. The Great Barrier Reef is obviously a very long reef section, and it's made up of lots of different hubs, and each of those hubs have their own individual networks. We've always tried to, when I was working out of Port Douglas, actually up north of Cairns, was to try and actually have all of the dive instructors working together on cleanups. If someone had found a net attached to the reef and they couldn't get it off and they were able to get someone else to come over and help them, they would do things like that. We've always asked the dive operators to use training or required training scenarios on the boat, like a man overboard drill, to actually pick up a piece of rubbish instead of throwing over a life ring that they then have to go back and pick up. If they saw something floating in the water that they could use as an example or as an item to go back and do those drills. So there's lots of ways that they can collaborate on the conservation message. I think that there's things that they need to do better. There's infrastructure, basic infrastructure at some of the marinas that doesn't exist, and if there's a better collaboration between the different charter operators to really push for that infrastructure to be put in place, and things like sullage dumping and recycling systems that have to happen at marinas, they have a really good opportunity to push for that basic infrastructure to be put in place that enables them to be more sustainable moving forward as well. So I think there are some good collaborations out there, but I think that they could leverage off that partnership much more to help with their sustainability outcomes as well.
Thanks for that, Heidi. It's a great message. I think that's a real key message for everyone sitting there at home listening. You know, don't feel like you're lost if you want to get involved in marine conservation, but you simply don't know how to start. There are many people out there that you can reach out to for help and advice, including all of the people on this panel. You know, there's a wealth of knowledge, experience, and so on that people could draw upon. But don't feel like you're in this alone. I guess my final question would be who will I go to? Jim. You mentioned earlier, Jim, about how Fourth Element has shared information with other manufacturers. And I'm just wondering, I'm very curious because I have no experience of it myself. How is it within the manufacturing sphere and organizations or businesses, working together to tackle the plastic pollution problem?
Well, I think it's something that everybody, I mean, we all got into this because we love diving, right? I mean, we all got into this sport because we love being underwater, and the vast majority of us would love to see scenes like the image behind me. And I think that everyone in this industry feels the same way. And so the conversations actually have been remarkably easy and met with enthusiasm from pretty much everyone. I mean, there were obvious exceptions of people who didn't really want to play all in the same sandpit, but the reality is that we do actually, you know, work with other organizations really well, and we've all got a history of that within the industry of listening to each other and working together. That and I think we all see that plastic problem as being a huge challenge that we can do something about. I mean, it's one of those awful things, you know, learned helplessness is a terrible thing. Well, now's not the time for learned helplessness. We can do something, and it's a small thing, and everyone can do something. It just, you know, you make small changes. We as a business make small changes. Individuals can make small changes. The industry can make small changes, and eventually those changes will add up and will become something bigger and something more significant than we can all say that we're a part of.
Lovely, thank you, Jim. We're moving into the final minute of our session, so I guess I should just do a quick wrap up. So I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this topic. I wish we had another hour or two to really delve into more depth in this. But unfortunately, we are running out of time. So I guess just some quick key take-home messages for anybody that's listening. From what we've heard from the panelists, we all have a role to play, no matter how small we think it may be. When you consider how many people on our planet, if everybody was to do a little thing, actually collectively, that's a huge thing. So we all have a role to play. We all need to use our consumer power to drive change. So make sure you stand up and ask for what you want and don't sit and wait and think it's going to happen. If you don't speak about it, then nothing will. To any businesses out there, that you should make the ethical and sustainable business choice and start contributing to marine conservation. And don't be afraid to reach out for help and advice from experts in the field. Take a collaborative approach. That's a key message, I guess, that came out of it as well, involving all relevant stakeholders, including local communities. Together we are stronger. And obviously get involved in citizen science. It's a great way that the dive industry can contribute to marine conservation and help scientists to learn more about the marine life that we all love so much. So a big thank you from me personally to all of the panelists for giving up 1 hour of your time on World Oceans Day. Thank you to the organizers and of course everyone who has tuned in to listen to us over the last 1 hour. Take care, guys. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks very much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much for staying. But